All right, we'll get started. Welcome to Ask the Experts. We have brought it back from last year. Tri-City Regional Chamber of Commerce, a series to help business owners and leaders grow their companies with practical advice and answers that you can implement right away. I think it's one of the best things of value that the Chamber offers to us as business owners and leaders, and it's free. And why is it free? Because STCU is our sponsor. So come on up here, Sarah. I want to welcome you all on Zoom as well. We're so glad that you are watching our Ask the Experts today alongside those that are here in the room. Sarah Michelin is here from STCU.
Sarah Michelin, actually it's Sarah Hichelin.
Michelin. She told me it rhymes with Michelin, and then I said it.
My name is like Michelin tires, only with an H. So I also respond to Michelin apparently. Anyway, we just want to extend a warm welcome to all of those who are here and to who are those online. We consider it a real privilege to partner with the Chamber and bring you Ask the Experts. We're founded by educators. So education at every level, from elementary to high school to adult, to programs like Ask the Experts are in our DNA, and we're thrilled. And we're thrilled, Paul, that you've done the heavy lifting on this and made it happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Let's give STCU a hand. Be sure to grab one of their pens or pads of paper in the back for taking notes today. Well, my name is Paul Casey of Growing Forward Services. I do leadership coaching and training and facilitation, and I'm privileged to be the facilitator of Ask the Experts. So again, we are grateful for STCU's support of Ask the Experts. And here's how it's going to work today. So for about half of our 90 minutes together, our experts will be presenting their gold nuggets on the topic of getting traction on your business in 2023. Then for the second half of the program, they will answer your questions. And here's how we're going to do that. If you'd like to ask a question, whether you're virtual or you're here in the room, I want you to text me. And I'm just going to put that slide up here at 509-392-1895. So at any time while they're presenting, you're like, oh, I got a question like right now. Text me that question. What I'm going to do is I'm going to be vetting those questions, and then I will feed them to the experts, getting to as many of them as possible in our time. So again, whether you're on Zoom or here in the room, please text me your questions and we'll get as many of those as we can. And if you'd like to contact Brett or Brad, they will be available afterward, right? And you can see the handiwork of their slide making ability, which is very lovely today as well. So they are actually fantastic at this. So I'm going to introduce our speakers today. Let's start with Brett Spooner. Brett is the founder and CEO of Gravis Law, a nationwide law firm and a technology company headquartered in Richland, Washington. Besides running one of the fastest growing law firms in the nation, Brett is a tech enthusiast, serial software entrepreneur, adjunct professor, angel investor, and presently supports numerous companies and community organizations as a board member and advisor. Brett's goal is to solve accessibility issues in law, foster entrepreneurship in a rural mid-market, and support economic development more globally. He is actively engaged in multiple philanthropic works, investment funds, commercial real estate development, and private business endeavors, ranging from a solar-powered distillery to industry-disrupting software. When Brett's not in the boardroom, you might find him growing grapes, ferrying his daughters to various sporting events, hunting with his dad, or just maintaining an elaborate virtual farm with his wife in Stardew Valley. Brett Sappenfield. Aside from his morning coffee, learning new things and passing that knowledge on to others is the fuel that ultimately motivates Brad. As Chief Operating Officer, he mentors the Spotted Fox digital team forward with over 14 years of experience in small business and 22 plus years of experience in web design and composition. Central to all the greatest resources, it's very common to hear Brad raving about a new software, a new process, or a new method that nobody understands today, but won't be able to live without tomorrow. Born and raised in Alabama, Crimson Tide red is his favorite team color, aside from Spotted Fox orange, of course. And the process of nurturing a team is his favorite aspect of the game. When he's not decision-making or organizing wonderful storms of creative chaos at Spotted Fox, he enjoys life and routine on the ultimate team with his wife. No matter how successful his coaching is at work or how many points he scores with a big client, Brad believes his life with his wife and their 2 huskies is the ultimate win. Let's give it up for our 2 experts today, Brad and Brett.
All right. Here, look, it works. So I would give Brad and his team kudos for this presentation. They did a good job putting it together. It was really nice. It was fun working with them on it. So we're here to talk about entrepreneurial operating systems today. How many of you are aware of it, or in advance of seeing the presentation? Anybody implementing it in their organization or running an organization? All right, excellent. How long have you been implementing?
About a year.
About a year?
2 years.
2 years, cool. And visionaries or integrators?
COO.
Okay.
I take the vision and implement.
We're gonna test you all today.
Yeah.
We're gonna do the catalyzer, you'll find out if you're a visionary or an integrator. It's an important question. So basically, we're gonna talk through this today. We've done introductions here, so we're gonna drop through this. EOS model is really about 6 core components. It's about vision, people, data, issues, process, and traction. And the theory here is that if you can get these components collectively organized within your organization, you're going to get traction in the business. As we talk through each of these sections today, I know Paul said you got to text him to ask questions. I'm going to break the rules. You can ask us questions along the way, especially when you get into some of these, if that's okay. So, sure. Okay. I
just want to welcome the Zoom people.
Yeah, Zoom people text away, but I'm free form here a little bit as we run through this. So there's these 6 key components. When we think about vision, we're really trying to align everybody on the core vision of the organization. We'll talk about the 8 questions that we want to ask and answer in order to get that vision alignment. When we talk about people, we're talking about getting the right people and the right seats. When we look at data, we're trying to figure out how we can manage this on a weekly basis. Data that's easy to access, quick and readily available to make management decisions. Issues is a component of, we call it IDS, but really it's about identifying the root cause and really getting in and solving those issues as you move through your organization. Process is about standardizing process. It's not about a massive rule book. It's not about a massive procedural manual. It's really about efficient, simplistic process that can be followed by everybody in your organization. And then we're talking about traction. We're talking about setting meaningful targets that you can manage to and quarterly and weekly objectives. And we'll talk about this concept of a level 10 meeting. Level 10 meeting really brings all this together, and we'll watch a video on that at the end. So it's really a framework to simplify a lot of really classic literature out there in the business space. There's a lot of books, Good to Great and so forth, that have culminated in sort of corporate literature and created countless frameworks from experts out there. The EOS process is really a distillation of a lot of that in a way that can be deployed by small business. And by the way, we're not EOS consultants. We don't get paid for this. We're utilizing the tool in the process. So there's books in the EOS library that we'll talk about that you can access. This is based primarily on a book called Traction. And from a practical standpoint, one of the challenges is, as we were rolling it out at Gravis Law and looking at different frameworks, as we started to grow and scale, we ran into the common problem you do in most businesses. How do we continue to share the vision? How do we get everybody in the organization, especially when we're geographically dispersed, to be aligned on the vision of the organization? And how do we train mid-management and new managers to be able to deploy consistency for our team and our clients? And so I'm just a firm believer in process and framework, but the challenge is, how do you make it simple? How do you make process and framework digestible and something that you can share out into your organization and something that you can utilize as a tool rather than an added layer of bureaucracy? So it really is about simplifying things. So in the library, there's an assortment of books. Once again, as I mentioned, there's Traction, but they've then subsequently followed on. The first book I actually read was Rocket Fuel. And Rocket Fuel is this idea of the visionary integrator, and we're going to do a test here in a second to figure out where you fit. But I score as a visionary, and I know that without a good operations person, without a good integrator, I'm only half the equation. I'm probably going to be I'm going to be running in a little bit more of a chaotic state, and I need to be grounded and normalized with a good COO or operator. And rocket fuel is about needing both pieces. If you have just an operator without the vision and the ideas, then you also get a different outcome there. So rocket fuel is a great one for those of you that are in that category trying to figure out how to get the recipe right. Did you want to hit on any of the?
Yeah, for sure. I think rocket fuel is very important, especially trying to understand whether you are a visionary or whether you are an integrator, and finding that common part, that opposite part of you, kind of referred to as the yin and yang. It really is very much a business relationship, and it's important that you're both on the same page. So the rocket fuel is very, very important when it comes to the whole EOS model. It's all based off of every successful company always has two at the top. There's always the visionary who's kind of the head and always in front, and everybody knows that person. But then there's always an integrator in the background operating and running the company that doesn't necessarily get all of the clout of being the CEO. The other important one, EOS Life. I feel like because EOS really, we talk about terminology, EOS is very much a lifestyle, and that's what the EOS Life book is. It takes it from, yes, you can implement this in your business, but it also takes it and gives it a point where you can implement it in your personal life. And I know, Brett, you've sat down with your family and you've created a VTO that we do in our business, but we've done one for your family, an individual VTO that everybody can kind of share the same vision for your family, your business, whatever. And that's really what the EOS Life speaks to, is, being able to do something you love and being rewarded handsomely, and having a great team with it. That's really what the EOS Life is all about. Process, that's the most recent book that was released. I think it was released in September, October of last year. Very, very important piece. We talk about the 6 key components. Every piece is equally important. Process is a piece that you do not want to forget. If I had to go back 3 years, I would focus all my time on process.
Process first. Yeah, and we kind of glazed through the first books here, but when you're sharing EOS out to the organization, and we're relatively new at deploying this, just so transparently, we'll be coming up on our first year, middle of this year. So we're through all of the orientation piece, setting up our VTO and starting to roll it out into the organization. And it's still going to be another year or two in the making at the size and scale that we're rolling it out. But there's different books to read at different stages of the process. So what the heck is EOS? Is a good book to pass out to employees or people trying to get a basic framework. Traction's good for your visionary integrator and your leadership team. There's how to be a great boss for managers in your organization. And then of course, rocket fuel is a good one for the visionary and the integrator to think about how to make that powerful team combination. And then in addition to all of those books, there's a lot of online resources when it comes to EOS. You have things like EOS Worldwide. EOS Worldwide has a countless number of resources, has a whole EOS toolkit. So everything that we're talking about today, easily available. You can go to EOSworldwide.com and download all of the tools that we're talking about today. Podcasts, there's an extensive amount of podcasts. They have series for Rocket Fuel, they have series for EOS Life, and then EOS in general. Check those out, very valuable, because you're not just hearing from the people who created EOS, you're hearing from actual business owners, actual CEOs, integrators that have actually used it and implemented this in their business. EOS One, it's a great tool. It's everything we talked about today, all the tools, it's all built into one online platform. So when you have issues that come up, or if you have we're going to talk about the VTO and our accountability chart. All of these can be put into the EOS One tool. It is a beta tool, but it's very valuable. Yeah, I'll talk about that. EOS One, we use that in our organization. So we run all of our level 10 meetings, which are your weekly meetings across your different departments. Our vision traction organizer, which we'll learn about, is all in that application. And one of the challenges we ran into, and our strategic plan used to be 20 pages long, and the budgets and all the different department initiatives would roll up under goals. And the challenge we had was actually, how the heck do you track it all and make sure that you're getting meaningful updates to whatever your strategic plan is? And the framework helps with that. But we found the application that they put together, which is free as of now, is a really slick tool for tracking your quarterly objectives and your weekly to-dos.
Right. And then we have Rocket Fuel University. So going back to Rocket Fuel, the visionary integrator relationship, it's a great tool. They have master classes. I attended a master class in Denver last year with like 50 other integrators. And it was one of the most amazing conferences I've ever been to. Got a lot of value out of that. There's other programs that you can enroll in that comes to Rocky Hill University.
So I'll say, and we'll come back to the resources at the end, but just as a body of information out there, there's a lot on EOS. Entrepreneurial Operating Systems framework has been used by a lot of different organizations, and I think they continue to refine the literature that's out there as well as the resources to support rollout. And certainly we work with an implementation consultant to roll it out in our organization. There are many companies that will roll it out without the consultant. I think that having somebody who's very familiar with EOS definitely helps, but there's a lot of wayfinding you can do on your own to roll it out. And certainly the size and scale of the rollout probably matters when you, did you guys use a consultant?
Yes, we did. I would not recommend trying to self-implement if you have not had experience with EOS. That's just me personally. But it is good to have somebody there to kind of hold you accountable. I highly recommend an implementer to help you with your quarterlies and all of those things.
Well, before we kick into the different sections of EOS and really kind of dive into it, Brad will run you through this test here.
Yeah, so are you a visionary integrator? There's a tool called the Crystallizer quiz. There's a QR code up here if you can scan it. If you're not able to scan it, if you just Google EOS Crystallizer assessment or Crystallizer quiz, it'll pop up. It's about I think there's 40 questions in there, so it's going to take a couple minutes to get through. But it's going to spit out two results for you. It's going to give you an integrator score, and it's going to give you a visionary score. And it's going to tell you which one that you lean more towards. For me personally, I had 91 for my integrator score, at 82 for a visionary score. I am an integrator, but I like the visionary stuff too.
I was about 90-70 visionary integrator.
So it's a pretty simple quiz. You just answer questions 1 through 5, and it emails you your results. Pretty quick.
Let's go take the quiz. You got this. Is the QR code working? It's not picking it up. I think it's the colors are too light.
Yeah. If you Google, seriously, it'll be the first result. EOS Crystallizer quiz. It should be the very first result.
Did I hear that correctly?
Yes.
Visionary trapped as an integrator?
You sleep at night?
I was.
It was.
That was.
Yes.
I've had to wear both hats through the years. And I'm always really unhappy when I'm only integrating. Yeah. How old is your organization?
30 years.
How many employees?
Full health, yeah, about 35.
Okay, 35 to 40. So how many level 10s do you run in a week?
We run just a leadership team every week, get together, go through our PTO and all our rocks actions. I try and pick an issue each week that is somewhat solvable.
Yeah.
But it's tough to just finding the time.
It is,
It is incredibly hard.
yeah. We've been battling that. So we have about 150 employees and trying to figure out what the right formula for rolling this out across different teams. Do we have location? Because we have multiple locations in different markets. Is it a location based level 10? Is it a functional level 10. But the way I usually articulate it with our employees is if you're gonna save time by having this meeting, that's worthwhile. Yeah. If it's actually eating time, it's not. But if the meeting is saving future meetings or future meetings times a multiple, it's.
Yeah, we actually bought books for every employee and rolled it out there, so what was coming up.
That was what the heck is US?
Traction.
Traction,
yeah,
traction,
traction, yeah.
Which is what our, going that way, but just getting the VTO was a lot longer than we anticipated. You really have to figure out where are you, what are your goals, what are your values, what is your mission really, and get you rethinking about everything.
Good.
Yeah.
Right. Oh.
Yeah.
But I put it as a phone. Cause I don't. That's weird.
Yeah, that's an assumption. Yeah, for sure.
The right now, the visionary split. Not being critical, right, messed up, right, just, yeah. Be quick on these questions, can't overthink them. Yeah, good response.
First
one.
first gut response.
Visionary. That's kind of what I think. I think the integrator is the one who brings it probably more likely. They will, yeah. Need framework.
Visionary finance.
Yeah.
Right.
Unless it's
Just about.
is there right? Yeah.
It's more or less. Still searching.
I'm not.
Yeah.
It's all in one. Since I have-
You got some visionaries or integrators yet?
I may not be either.
Oh, that'd be nice.
Yeah.
It's very possible.
You got what? Equal?
It's 63 and small.
Okay. Right down the middle.
More doer.
All right, by show of hands, how many visionaries do we have in the room? All right, integrators? Kind of even split. Okay. And in your organization, who brought it to the table, the visionary or the integrator?
Visionary.
Visionary brought it to the table? Okay, what about your organization, do you know?
Sir in the back.
He's still taking his test.
Still taking it, sorry. Really slow reader, not everything.
We'll jump into it here.
Yeah, we can hit on this. Okay, so EOS, one of the things that I really like about it is it does simplify everything. So one of the analogies that they use when you're teaching EOS is the rock, pebble, sand analogy. Is anybody heard of that? Familiar with that? So you have a jar, you have rocks, you have pebbles, you have sand. There's only one way, one specific way that those can go into the jar that's actually gonna work. You can't put the sand in, you can't put the pebbles in first at all, won't work. You have to put the rocks in first. Rocks go in first, then your pebbles, then your sand. And it's kind of the analogy of when you're thinking about your business. When it comes to EOS, we set quarterly rocks. Those are the most important things that you should be doing from day one, and that's what you should be tracking your results on. If you're not focused on your rocks, you're never gonna hit your goals. And so in EOS, we use the term rocks a lot. It's quarterly goals. What we're focused on, it's what we talk about every week in our L10 meeting. It's what we look at the end of the quarter. It's how we push our organization ahead every single quarter. And that's the one focus that EOS has for every team member, is setting your rocks and setting the right rocks for your organization.
Most people spend their time with the sand, unsurprisingly. And it's easy to get distracted with those daily things that pop up and not ever get to those quarterly rocks. Rocks typically in most organizations, and how we implemented the process, you realize how often those quarterly objectives just slip out to the next quarter because you were dealing with so much of this other less important goals or objectives within the organization. So it's more than anything an accountability tool in a lot of ways. Yeah. All right, so we're going to jump into the 6 sections now. We'll start with vision here. So when we say vision, the VTO is a vision traction organizer. I articulate this in our organization to be about a 2-page strategic plan. It is something that you can convey and should convey your entire organization. It needs to be something that everybody is aware of, knows, shares, and understands. From a mission, vision, value standpoint, most literature agree, you got to tell your organization more than 10 times before it really sinks in. It's not something you can just put on a wall somewhere and hope everybody takes it to heart and lives it and embodies it. And part of what we'll talk about as we look through people and data and all of the other things that we're going to look at in these 6 core components, they're all looked through the lens of the vision. So once you've got your vision set, you're going to hire through your vision. You're going to fire people because they don't match the corporate objectives. They don't have the right components necessary to stay within the organization. One of the challenges of rolling EOS out, in fact, is you go through an analysis of your team and make sure everybody gets it, wants it, and has capacity to do it, and also aligns with your values. If you have values and you have people in your organization maybe not in the right seat, not in the right role, maybe they don't share the same corporate values, then you've got to find that kind of alignment. So it is a lens through which you look at your organization and operate your organization. There's 8 questions that EOS asks us to evaluate as we go through this process of setting the vision. And that's what your core values are. Core values and many strategic plans are a key component, often team values or core values. EOS wants us to really keep it around 5. We don't want to overcomplicate the values. It's a very tough exercise though to distill down your vision into these pieces. What's your core focus? Core focus is broken into your purpose and niche. Is that correct? Core focus is your purpose and niche.
Yep.
It's really kind of like your mission statement in a lot of ways. Then we look at a 10-year target. A 10-year target is that big goal out in the future that you're striving towards. It's going to help you set the velocity of your organization. And then we have a component on the marketing strategy. You're going to look at figuring out what your target market is from a marketing standpoint. You're going to look at a 3-year picture. Why 3 years? Does anybody know? So we've got our 10-year big goal. Why do we then jump to 3 years? Why not 5?
Leases are free.
Yeah, no. Some are 5. 5 years is too far out. Our strategic plan before we went into EOS was we had a 10, a 5, and then our 1 year. And I realized that the 5 year was just a throwaway. It was just a little bit too far out to be real and create urgency. And the minute we set a 3-year goal, it was like, holy shit, we've got to get going this year, or we're not going to hit our 3-year target. The procrastination is a lot harder when you're looking down a 3-year target. It's a big target to hit. 10 years, it's so far out in the future that it's aspirational and you can you can rally bigger picture concepts around it, but when you set a 3-year target and if it's got real metrics behind it, and it should, that's gonna be a tough one that's gonna set your 1 year really urgently. Then you have your 1 year, and then we break that 1 year down into those quarterly rocks. Those rocks that you set each quarter, they're the 3 to 7 most important things that you should focus on each quarter in order to hit that 1 year. And then we break those rocks into weekly to-dos. The whole concept of traction, which we'll sort of close with this idea of traction in a level 10 meeting, is about getting to that 1 year target through effective goal setting. So the VTO, I'm going to show you a VTO. This has some of our data, and it's a work in progress on our end for the most part. And so this is a concept of what a VTO would look like. And I think it's really important to see it. This is straight out of the Beta app. So you have your core values, a Gratis law. We have fun and effective, intentionally entrepreneurial, invested in teams and community, solution driven, and committed to excellence. That was a workshop of our leadership team and focus groups through our organization. We already had team values and core values, but we as we rolled the OS out, we said, are these really our values? Are these the values that we hold most? Like we had to pick 5, and we had more than 5. Then when we looked at our mission and vision and distilled it into our core focus, our purpose is uncomplicating access to world-class legal services while making the practice law fun and rewarding. We're in a miserable industry, in the legal industry, and as we kept working through this process, fun kept resonating with what makes us different. And our employees have fun. Not fun like work hard, play hard fun, but just how do we find joy in bringing service to our communities again? How do we do something that we're passionate about, and it's not just about the billable hour? And so fun kept coming up. I'm like, we've got to get that built into our purpose. So our niche is rural mid-market. We're not focused on major metros, and we're vertically integrating the operational support for the practice law to make it easier for practitioners to deliver legal service in their market. So 10-year target, we used to have a 10-year KPI that was financially based. And one of the things that we had to wrap our heads around as a leadership team as we set the vision and rolled it out, it's one thing as a group of leaders in your organization to sit down and set your corporate vision. It might make sense to the owners, and it might make sense to the leadership or executive team, but does it make sense to your entry staff positions? Do they understand why they're doing what they're doing within your organization? And so where before we would put a big vision together and we'd work on it and we'd set a 10-year target, it was usually a KPI that was financially based. Might have been a net income driver, it might have been an amount of revenue. As we worked through this, our 10-year target became about our clients and about how many clients we could serve in 10 years. Not just how many were we serving 10 years from now, but what's the rolling amount of service that we could provide into our markets in alignment with access. Did you guys go through the marketing strategy side? It's something we haven't. There's a piece in the VTO called marketing strategy. You know, you would hire these folks.
Of course we did.
I don't know, maybe it's called their shoes. So when you set your 3-year picture, though, that's when stuff gets real. You have to start setting actual financial KPIs. You got to figure out what your revenue target is going to be, what your profit margin is going to be. I mean, how much growth are you going to try to experience? And then you set goals. Those 3-year goals are really important because they're going to drive what you need to accomplish in year 1, 2, and 3 as you move out into the future. But then we get into the 1-year plan and have to figure out how to start setting quarterly rocks. This is 2 pages, and this is something you share with your entire organization. Sometimes as an owner, sometimes as a leader, it's uncomfortable to think about sharing what your financial metrics are, what your KPIs are, what your targets are on a weekly basis. And, you know, there's different philosophies. I'm an open book kind of mindset when it comes to this, and I love EOS for that. It really does normalize the concept of what data points we're tracking and why. We've got to be profitable in order to run and maintain a good business, and we've got to do it on a cash basis. I mean, we've got to be bringing money in to make the engine turn. And so that's an okay conversation to have with whatever team in your organization is part of making that happen. whether it's about your sales funnel, whether it's about production capabilities within your team, having open and transparent conversations is a great part of this. This is something that all your employees should get. They should know not just the vision of the organization, but what are the financial objectives and how can they support those from their different departments and from their different organizations. If we're good stewards of our organization and we're profitable, then we're going to do good to the employees. We're going to be having more fun. We're going to be having corporate retreats. We're going to be celebrating the wins, and that's important. All right, we're jumping into the people now. So on the vision, most important thing that I can articulate in this is making sure that it's something that you share with the organization. And it needs to be, and EOS helps really distill that down.
Yeah, to kind of go off of what Brett was saying is like, the VTO is really kind of your same page document. If you're not sharing this with your staff, how can they support your goals? You know, one of the biggest things that we did when we implemented it and when we rolled it out is sharing that with our team of like, here are our goals for the year. How can they support it? They don't know what your goals are. How are they supporting that? And so really, really important piece of that VTO. You can't complete the circle. You can't hold anybody accountable without that VTO. Number one. People. Okay, so we talk about people. People in an organization, very, very important. As a business owner, people are really our most important asset, right? So being an important asset, we have to make sure that we have the right people in the right seat. They have to be the right person first, and we determine that from our core values. So talking about the VTO, we set our core values. This is what we live and breathe by, what we hire, fire, and reward off of. We have to make sure we have the right person. We have the right person in the right seat. The right seat is determined off the accountability chart. The accountability chart is very much like an organization chart, but it's very different. It's not your traditional CEO, COO, and your different branches. It looks similar to that, but the idea with your accountability chart is that you have a focus on every role in your organization. And that role has 5 key focuses, and that's what they should be focused on the entire time that they're in that role. Inside the accountability chart, you can only have one person in a box. Now, one person could be in 10 boxes and they have all those roles to fill. But you have to have one person in a box, and that's what that person is held accountable for. And then everybody underneath them. People analyzer, that's how we evaluate things. One of those important things about EOS, one of the things that's been helpful for me is actually having a real way to give real-time feedback to your staff. So people analyzer, we all base it off of our core values, and we do a rating, and the rating is very simple. You give them a plus, minus, or a minus. So minus is they're not meeting expectations, they're not doing well, they're not meeting the core value. Plus minus means they are meeting, but not exceeding. So they're kind of average, but there's room for improvement. A plus means they're exceeding the core value, and that's where you want everybody to be. And when you go through and you're analyzing, you're doing that on a quarterly basis, you base it all off that person in the role and how are they doing according to those core values. After the core value, if they're the right person, that's great. We can figure out then what's the right seat for them. And we do that through the people analyzer. We do gets it, wants it, and capacity. So do they get the role? Do they want the role? And do they have the capacity to do it? Mental and physical capacity to complete that role. This next one is going to be there we go. Accountability chart. Right here, visionary, always at the top. There's 5 bullets under each one. This is kind of a sample accountability chart. There's always visionary at the top, integrator, and sales, operations, and finance. We're going to see things like visionary. They're usually the idea person. 20 ideas, creative problem solving, big relationships, culture. They're responsible for the culture, making sure core values are established, that they're being followed. R&D, research and development, all big picture stuff. And then the visionary role, typically everything they do is based on emotion. They act off of emotion most of the time. Integrator, exactly the opposite. So you're going to see here, LMA. We use the word LMA a lot in the accountability chart. It stands for lead, manage, and hold accountable. So you lead, you manage your people, everybody underneath you, and you hold them accountable for their role. For P&L, so basically the integrator responsible for P&L, removing obstacles and barriers, special projects, and then their decisions are typically based more on logic than emotion. And then you have the different categories, and you can break this down. We have a little bit bigger accountability chart, but you want to make sure that every role in your organization, regardless of whether it's filled by the right person or not, you need to make sure that there's a box for every role within your organization. And that's the only way that you're able to hold anybody accountable. People analyzer. So this is a sample people analyzer. There is a tool. You go to the EOS one or EOS Worldwide. There's a tool for this people analyzer. Easy chart, you put in person's name, and then you have your core values right here. And you go through, we do this quarterly, we go through and we rate each team member based on their role. How are they doing under the accountable core value, passionate, happy, and everyone should have that core value, and you rate it here, the plus, minus, and minus. And then as long as they pass the right seat, then we look at gets it, wants it capacity. From there, EOS helps us self-determine, is this the right person for organization? And are they in the right seat? If they're not the right person, that's an easy decision. They're in the right seat, but they're not the right person, probably the hardest decision. Because if you have somebody that does really, really well at the role, but they're not meeting your core values, they're negatively impacting your culture, negatively impacting your other employees. And so that's actually a harder decision to make when it's the right person.
Can I ask just a question?
Yeah.
So the gets it, wants it capacity, is that based on the role or based on the core value? Like these you're rating on the core value, right?
Yeah, so the right person is the core value, making sure that that person meets all of your core values. The gets it, wants it capacity is based on their role,
The person
their box.
the whole line.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it, perfect.
Yeah.
That you're not based on the fact of, do they have the capacity to be
Yeah.
committed? Do they have the
No.
capacity to be happy?
That
Okay.
yeah,
No, yeah, exactly. Those are all rated separately.
yeah, you don't ever get to the GWC if we don't pass
Okay.
the people analyzer, the right person.
So your business values would go there, not necessarily.
Exactly. Yeah, these are your core values.
Okay.
So-
And then the bar, is that the prize? You go to the bar? No, what does the bar mean? The bar?
So
Oh,
you
yeah.
set the bar depending upon, you know, how many core values you have. The bar is like, what is the acceptable threshold?
Yeah.
For us, we have 5 core values and our acceptable threshold is 2 plus minuses, no negative. If somebody has more than 2 plus minuses or a negative, then we go into what we call a performance improvement plan. So we don't say, oh, you're the wrong person. We give them tools and we go back and say, hey, these are the things that you're not doing well on. Here's the resources. Here are things that we're going to do for you to help you get to that point. And then we put them on like a 60 or a 90-day performance improvement plan. If we don't see any kind of significant improvement in that time frame, we have the ability then to let them go because they're not the right person for organization. So it really helps systematize that and makes it very open, especially for your staff. They know easily where they stand with that people analyzer. We do it every quarter. We even have them self-analyze themselves. They have a chance to rate themselves. So we see from their perspective, how do they feel like they're doing? Because they may have a different perspective than we do, and then we have a conversation about it. Not like, you're doing bad, you suck. It's not that at all. It's trying to get them and make them better and make them grow as people.
Does this become your employee annual review, or you do that and this is the extra?
Yeah, typically it does. It becomes basically, you're supposed to do it once a year. As far as documenting, in EOS, you typically have quarterly conversations, and these are all brought up in the quarterly conversations. Part of the quarterly conversation is the self-evaluation of the employee, and then we have a conversation. If they feel like they're negative at one side or plus minus, well, what can we do this next quarter to be better? The quarterly conversations are very, very important because it kind of helps you kind of analyze the previous quarter and then help set your goals for the next quarter.
We've integrated it in our process as well. As part of the shift for us, setting their personal rocks and going through this process will become part of it.
All right, so data. Very important that we have data, right? Because, you know, as entrepreneurs, specifically visionaries, all act off of emotion and how you feel. But with data, it actually helps us like solidify those emotions when we have them. We have a gut feeling, you know, it's right. When we have the data and we have the right data, it helps us make smarter decisions in the business. So data in EOS, it allows leaders to let go of the vine. One of the hardest things to do as a leader. When I started working on the business was never a real concept for me because I was more in execution mode. EOS has allowed me to really focus and work on the business versus in the business. And the data component is a really key piece of that. The scorecard. Every week now in the level 10 meetings, we have a scorecard. Scorecard is something that we track over the 12 weeks. There should be a goal set for every number. You're trying to meet that metric every week. But it's also important that everybody have a number, whether it's in the department level or whether it's in level 10, everybody should have a number, and that's based off of the seat or the seat they have on the accountability chart. So everybody should be accountable for at least one number on your scorecard, and that's something that we go over every single week in the L10 to make sure we're on track. The easiest way to explain the scorecard and the data part is when we first started EOS, I said, imagine if you're sitting on a deserted island, and you're just looking at a piece of paper. What numbers are going to help you keep a pulse on the business? So what numbers are important in your business? That's what should be on the scorecard. Scorecard is a very difficult thing to nail down. I'll tell you that we're still we've been doing it for about 2.5 years. We're still kind of changing that and modifying it. And we're kind of dialing it in, getting better numbers and getting things that are going to help us really kind of determine the scorecard gives you a weekly pulse on the business, but it also allows you to be proactive if you're not meeting that goal. And it also helps us point out current issues and predict future issues. So really, really important to follow that.
Yeah, and one of the key pieces here is the data has to be able to be something you can quickly update weekly. So, I mean, like when we rolled out EOS, we had too much data. And it was complex data that not everybody could utilize and not everybody could utilize on a weekly basis. So you don't want to spend a bunch of time getting a scorecard or a data point update. It's got to be something that is meaningful to the individual making business decisions or the team evaluating. And it's got to be something they can quickly get every week. So there's a whole bunch of data that we might look at on a monthly, quarterly, or annual basis that is not useful on a weekly basis, or that may not be updated until your books are closed or financial data is really structured a certain way.
Yeah, one of the things we were having, you're right, there's so much data out there.
Yeah.
But what's really important, and the other thing is, you want that data to be something that is saying you've got an issue out that's coming up.
Yeah.
You pull your profit and loss okay, well, that's what it is. You're looking backwards. So the point of the data is whatever, we've got about 10 to 12 that we look at on our scorecard. And it's what's it showing us in the future. It's where we're going rather than where we've been. I guess it may be a way to put that.
Yeah, exactly. Because a lot of the data is stale by the time you actually close out a month or a quarter and you go back and say, well, we would have done things differently if we'd known this along the way. Let's try to do it differently in the future. These weeklies let you actually do.
You can trend it a lot closer on a weekly basis than a monthly or quarterly basis.
And it's really important too on the data side when you're setting the scorecard for the executive or leadership team is not the same scorecard maybe for the sales team or for an operations department or something like that. They're going to be customized and relevant to the team.
Right. So measurables, very similar to the scorecard, but measurables typically come with your rocks. When you set your rocks, there's always a measurable for that. When we set rocks, we set them as SMART. So that we know the biggest part is knowing when they're done. And if you're not setting a goal or a rock that's SMART, the SMART.
Yeah, we do this.
What's it stand for?
Specific, measurable.
Measurable, attainable,
Yeah.
relevant, and time-bound.
Signature.
So all those are very, very important because you have to, when you set your goal of what you're going to do for the quarter, if you don't set it SMART, it's so hard to figure out. Like if somebody says, I don't know if it's complete or not, well, then it's not SMART. If you don't have a definitive goal to finish, it's hard to get that measurable.
And it's hard to write it succinctly. It's really hard to write it smart, but the task of simply making them that way helps clarify what the actual goal is.
Yeah, it does.
So going back a little bit to the scorecards,
Yeah.
so how many scorecards could you possibly have in one organization?
What they say is there should be 5 to 15 numbers on a scorecard.
Well,
On a scorecard, but in an organization, you could have.
You got a mini,
so that,
yeah,
you
so
could
there's,
have one for sales, one for marketing.
correct.
one for-
Every department would have a scorecard, correct? And then there's a leadership scorecard you have for the overall organization.
Okay.
And one thing that we've enjoyed about the application is you can actually link certain scorecard data points. So if one person updates one scorecard, they can actually flow into other scorecards. It's kind of a nice feature of the application. So we have common data that we're tracking that goes through many departments. And then we have unique departmental items and they can actually.
Yeah, your leadership scorecard or your department scorecard should support your leadership
Should be that
scorecard.
one.
Yeah, absolutely,
Okay, that's
100%. This is an example of a scorecard here, so you can kind of see where you have a measurable, you have a goal, and then we track this on a 12-week basis, so basically on a quarter, so you can see exactly what's happening on the quarter. Your measurables should be tied to your rocks in some way, and that's what your weekly goal is. So you can see this is kind of 12 weeks, you can see trends happening. And so every week as you go over your scorecard, you're not meeting that goal. If it's below that goal, then you can put that on the issues list, discuss it, and figure out what to do to get it back on track. Versus being reactionary at the end of the quarter, be like, well, what happened? You know, you're able to see this on a weekly basis and see how those numbers are adding up.
I can't say enough good things about the application too. When you go in and you set up a scorecard, it's as quick as just adding a row. And you can basically set what the measurable is and what the target is. And then as you're updating it, it'll go red, green, and it'll track it across the application. And so you have your historical log there. It's not a bunch of people keeping like a spreadsheet or something. I mean, you can do it that way, but as you get larger, having these scorecards all talking to each other is a huge help.
Okay, so some important things to consider here when it comes to the scorecards, kind of like what Brett mentioned. You want to make sure the data is easily accessible. You don't have to be running a bunch of database searches. You don't want to run reports and run calculations. It really should be something that comes very naturally to your employees, to your team, to be able to put that in. It's something we go over weekly. Let's see here. You have a recommendation here, designating a person responsible. You really should have, there should be somebody responsible for every number each week and making sure if you're, like he says here, integrator, you got to make sure that everybody on your team is putting that scorecard in. So that we have the data and we can go over that each week in our L10. It also is important to think about some KPIs are not well suited. One of the things we struggled with was we plan things either on a monthly or a quarterly basis. That was very, very hard to come up with a weekly number when we're thinking about things on a quarterly basis. So really, really important to sit down and start thinking about what is the weekly activity in the department or in the leadership role. What is that number that's going to help us determine? Again, we're still trying to figure out some of our numbers. It took us probably about 1.5 years to really dial those in. I feel like we have a really good scorecard now.
Yeah, the whole concept of monthly versus weekly is challenging because there are certain KPIs you need to track that are only really good on a monthly basis, depending on different sales cycles or cycles of invoicing or data aggregation. And so we can't lose sight of them, but we might not be able to meaningfully track them on a weekly basis. They may have a place in school. Still about 30 minutes, guys.
Okay. All right. So issues, real quick, I'll run through this. Your issues determine your ability to succeed. With issues, there's never anything to lose, always everything to gain. And the only issues that are solved are the ones that are brought to the surface. We use, there's a tool called the issues list inside EOS. We refer to it as a parking lot. One of the things we found is that when you say issues, there's some employees that are afraid to bring up issues. Well, it doesn't have to be issues. It can be new ideas. It can be new processes. It doesn't have to necessarily be a problem. So we just changed that terminology in our organization, parking lot, so that we have a repository and we, instead of being reactionary and every time an issue comes up, we just put it on the parking lot and deal with that on a weekly basis in our L10. The core part of the L10 is IDS. At least half of your L10 meeting should be focused on this. And this goes back to making sure that we're identifying the right issue, that we're discussing it, and we're solving it. IDS is the most important part of an L10 meeting. It should be at least half of your L10 meeting should be doing the IDS portion. Process. I don't want to glaze over this too much. Like I said, there is the process book by Mike Patton, Lisa Gonzalez, just released in September. It goes through the core process. The process is what it calls. It's identify, document, and package. And it walks you through that process. The most important part is not a long standard operation procedure, not a long manual, not every detail. 20% gets you 80% of the results. Your process should look like 5 or 6 top level bullet points and then bullet points underneath. So it's easy for everybody to follow. And once you have all that, we get traction.
All right, so I'm gonna, because we're getting close on time, traction is about bringing all these things together. And the way that we do that is in this level 10 meeting. We've got a short video here to watch. I think it summarizes the level 10 meeting really well. We share it with all of our staff. I'm gonna go ahead and share that. But the key here, when we're thinking about bringing the different pieces of the puzzle together, these rocks, setting meaningful quarterly rocks that these are the 3 to 7 most important things you can focus on each quarter in order to meet that 1-year target. And those quarterly rocks are broken into weekly to-dos. So every time you go into a meeting, in your level 10 meeting each week, you're looking at your rocks and you're looking and saying, are they on track or off track? And if that rock is off track, then there's probably an issue. You drop it down and have a discussion around how do we get this thing back on track? If one of your data points, one of your KPIs is off track, missing, you drop it down and you talk about it in your weekly meeting. And the goal is that as long as you get to the end of the quarter and all those are on track to be completed by the end of the quarter, then you're going to move on to the next quarter and take that next bite off, whatever is necessary to get to that end of your goal. So this level 10 meeting is just critical to the process. So we can go and just watch the video really quick, and they do a much better job summarizing than I did.
So here's how to have world-class meetings. At EOS Worldwide, we teach every client something called a level 10 meeting. We call it level 10 because every business owner we've interviewed, we ask them to rate the effectiveness of their meetings on a scale of 1 to 10. On average, they rated a 4. So if you're normal, the effectiveness of your meetings is somewhere around a 4. Here's how to get it to a level 10. As I illustrate the level 10 meeting for you, a couple of things I want to make note of. The reason it's so effective and why it's world-class is, frankly, it's a time management tool. You and your leadership team coming together for the precious 90 minutes I'm about to show you is going to save you time. You're literally going to save 2 to 3 times the amount of time you invest in the level 10 meeting as a result of avoiding train wrecks, the left hand knowing what the right hand's doing, miscommunications being avoided, and being more effective and accountable. With that said, a great meeting pulse has 5 points. A great meeting needs to be same day, same time, same agenda, start on time, and end on time. And so here we go. I'm now going to show you the psychology, the philosophy, and the flow of the perfect level 10 meeting. So here's the level 10 meeting. First of all, the meeting starts on time. What a concept. As Vince Lombardi taught us, early is on time is late. So if your meeting is Monday at 9 a.m., you and your leadership team are there at 8:55, small talking, ready to roll. Whoever runs the meeting at 9 o'clock on the button says, okay, everyone, good news. And so you're going to start your meeting off with good news. And so what good news is it's a segue. It helps a leadership team transition from working in the business all week to on the business. It also brings a human element by sharing both personal and professional good news. And so when I talked about the psychology, the philosophy, and the flow of huge psychology is just that human element that you bring. Good news takes about 5 minutes, so it's pretty rapid fire around the table. After good news, you then go into reporting mode. And so the next 3 agenda items are all about reporting. And so the psychology here is you're now going into the mode where you're making sure that everything that is important in your business is on track. You're making sure that your numbers are on track, your priorities are on track, and all your people are happy. And so here's what I mean. You're going to first review your scorecard to make sure that all your scorecard numbers are on track, 5 quick minutes. You're then going to do a rock review. And you're going to review to make sure that every rock you set for the quarter is on track, all of your priorities, 5 quick minutes there. And then you're going to share any customer or employee headlines. And what that is you're sharing good and bad news about customers and employees, 1-sentence headline, so you're all in the know on what's going on with all of your people. With that said, again, we're in reporting mode. Any number that's off track, any rock that's off track, or any customer employee headline that requires discussion, or it's an issue that needs to be solved, you just simply drop it down. Drop it down. Drop it down. And during this reporting mode, the idea is no discussion. You're not solving anything. You're just reporting. 15 quick minutes, because 5 minutes on customer employee headlines. And you're just building the issues list, which I'm going to come back to for you in just a moment. Once you're done reporting, you've extracted all the relevant issues, we then bring a little accountability into your life with a to-do list. Now watch this, very important to know. The to-do list is baked right into the level 10 agenda. The level 10 meeting agenda is one document that you're managing as a leadership team. It is a dynamic document where to-dos are going on, coming off every week, and your issues are going on and coming off every week. So again, a very dynamic document. With that said, 5 quick minutes reviewing all of last week's to-dos to make sure that they all got to done. Rule of thumb, 90% of your to-dos should be dropping off every week. If they're not, there's a problem somewhere, typically an accountability problem, but nonetheless, everything you committed to last week, 90% should be done. From there, after 5 quick minutes, we then go to the portion of the level 10 meeting called IDS. IDS is the issue solving track we teach every client. The IDS stands for identify, discuss, and solve. When you go to your issues list, you populate that issues list for the week, you prioritize what is the number 1, number 2, and number 3 most important issues. Never start at the top and work your way down. Always focus on the most important issue. You take number 1 and you first identify what is the real issue here. Before you start solving anything, it's vital you all agree, here's the issue. And sometimes you have to dig down to the root to get to that issue, but nonetheless, you first identify. Once you've identified, you then move to discuss, and that's where you and your team openly and honestly discuss that issue, every option, every solution, every idea. Then we push to solve. The only reason you're talking in this portion is to solve issues, and so you take number 1, you IDS it. Once it's solved, that issue comes off the issues list, dynamic document. Typically a to-do or 2 is created that needs to get done in the next 7 days. To-dos are 7-day action items. We then go to number 2 and we IDS it. When 2 is solved, becomes a to-do. We go to 3 IDS. Some weeks, you're only going to get through 1 issue. Some weeks you'll get through 10. You never know, but as long as you're taking them in order of priority, you're doing the right thing. With that said, you have a full 60 minutes for IDSing. Once there are 5 minutes left in the meeting, you then conclude the meeting. And in the conclusion, wherever you are on IDSing, conclude the meeting at 10:25. 5 minutes left, you do 3 quick things. You recap the to-do list. You discuss if there are any cascading messages that need to be cascaded out to the rest of the organization. And you quick rate your meeting 1 to 10. How'd you do today? 10 being best. This is going to help you and your team start to self-correct. You should be getting an 8 minimum. 8 is the minimum standard. And so if it's not an 8, you just simply get to ask why and start to self-correct. And then at 10:30 on the button, meeting ends on time. So your meetings aren't collapsing on top of other meetings in the organization. Back to the real world. That's how to have a world-class level 10, 90-minute weekly meeting with your leadership team.
All right, so this level 10 meeting is just a critical piece to the accountability of hitting those rocks. And it's amazing when you sit down each week with your team and look at what your objectives are for the quarter and break those into weekly accountability pieces. At first, our teams were showing up, the to-do list, we might be getting half or less of the weekly to-dos done. And once you start setting that accountability of getting 90% of those done each week, people show up with the project completed on a weekly basis, whatever that action item was, to make sure that you hit that quarterly objective. It sped up the efficiency of rolling out new initiatives, projects, addressing aspects that came out within rocks or issues immensely in our organization. And it's really because we procrastinate. If we have a quarterly target, we're going to show up a few weeks before the end of the quarter to try to just cram that target in. And we're all guilty of it. We're all guilty of procrastination. This is really a great accountability tool for you and your teams to break up whatever that annual, quarterly, weekly initiatives are.
So have you ever had a level 10 meeting? We're 8.5 is the highest we've ever had.
Yeah, every once in a while we'll give it a 9. We've had a 10 before, but I mean,
We've had some 10s.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
they're
they're,
in aggregate.
here's the thing about meetings is meetings are, it's not the meeting that's not productive, it's what you do inside the meetings. The L10 changes it all because it's the exact agenda you should follow. And the whole important piece is that the L10 helps you complete the circle. Without that L10, you cannot complete the circle, and you're doing it every week. And so it is hard to transition your team into it, but once they know every week they're going to be held accountable for it, they show up. Or they don't, and then you realize, you kind of go through the people analyzer and realize they're probably not the right person for the organization. So really it kind of helps weed out the people that kind of stay in the background and stay low level. You can't hide in EOS.
Yeah, those weeklies, 100% on the accountability side too, because it could be that people aren't doing a good job with their goal setting. They're just trying to bite off something bigger than they can either tackle in a quarter, or they're biting off a to-do that they can't get done in a week. Or it's a management issue, it's a performance issue, and it really quickly lets you get to the bottom of helping people improve their goal setting techniques or determining if you have performance issue.
Yeah.
Are you ready for questions, or do you have a couple?
Yeah, this is a summary of it. I mean, this is right here is an easy way to distill down what we've talked about in each of the sections. There's a lot to unpack here. This is not something you just like, oh, I've got the whole framework figured out from EOS. As we've worked on rolling it out in our organization, we've created a lot of information that we're going to be sharing with our teams. There's a good 20 definitions chart. EOS has a lot of good tools, and the application is a great feature to help keep you on track and organized.
Okay, one question here. Can a person be visionary and an implementer? Some people fill many job duties that might cross over.
It's tough. I mean, my answer is when you're starting out and you're a smaller business, you don't necessarily get the luxury of both.
I want to make sure I clarify though, as you said, implementer, there's a big distinction between there's a visionary and an integrator.
Integrator. I
Yeah,
think is the
so the
word.
implementer
Yeah.
is the actual consultant that helps you roll out EOS, that helps you with your quarterlies. An integrator is the one who's in the business
I think it means that,
integrating the vision. You can, but it's very much a challenge. Very, very much a challenge.
Every visionary should be looking for their integrator counterpart and vice versa. I mean, it is a core function. You can have strengths in both, but trying to live that dual role. I think the gentleman back here, what did you say? You were a visionary.
A visionary trapped in an integrator, which is on the leadership team. I believe Gino would say that only 5% of visionaries can be a V and an I together.
Yeah.
That it's impossible really.
And even if you try, you're not going to be happy.
And technically you're a V and an I because you got 80 or more.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, you dilute yourself because you have to be focused on one or the other to be super successful. And I think that's the biggest part is figuring out what do you thrive in and what do you enjoy the most? And then find that counterpart to that.
Years ago, if I had taken that test, I would have been more of an integrator. Because I had to. I would have answered those questions slightly differently.
I have a couple questions. So, my first thought was like, so how do you go out there? I'm looking for an integrator. I'm searching for an integrator. You put an ad on Craigslist. I need an integrator. So one is, how did this is both of you, how did your employees respond from a change management perspective with, okay, we're doing this EOS thing. I'd love to know how you kind of rolled that out to your teams and what were the first responses with the EOS?
I'll let him start because.
I definitely say there was an oh crap kind of moment, when you do, because anytime you have change, but I think it's important to like roll it out and communicate and let them know why you're doing it, not just, hey, we're doing this and you need to follow this, kind of painting them that vision. I would say that when we got in and we did an EOS day this past, we set our entire year goals and we sat down with our whole team, did an entire day, rolled out our entire vision. It changed the dynamic of our organization completely because then they started setting goals that actually work from ours, that actually support ours. And so when you're open and you roll it out and say, this is what we're doing, just be open and honest with your team and let them know that we're trying to make meetings more productive, that we want to help you grow. It's all about the culture. And so for us, it was a challenge to roll out, and you did have things that came up when it comes to people, but a lot of times the people issues, they work themselves out, because if anybody has a problem with it, they're most likely not meeting your core values or they're not in the right seat.
Mhm.
So all of those issues kind of come out of implementing EOS. So
Yeah, we brought our leadership team together to get the VTO built, and then we created a series of videos and information sharing leading up to the rollout. We're in the middle of it, but we have 17 different locations and a lot of different practice area teams across the firm. So it wasn't as easy for me as bringing the group together.
Yeah.
It was really something that first we had to make sure that our managers knew how to talk about it and that our department leaders knew how to talk about it. But what I've been articulating to the organization is this is a journey. This is not something that is just we're gonna turn a switch and we're gonna be an EOS tomorrow. This is a process. It's gonna take time to roll it out, and we're sharing the information so that they can start getting familiar with the terminology. And the benefit is that we're able to be more transparent with our VTO, share our core values, and really talk about it in a way that we can keep them updated with the things that we're working on. We can share our quarterly rocks before we run into the next quarter. I mean, half the time, by the time we got the strategic plan completed, and by the time we were able to start sharing out the relevant pieces, we were already quarter of the way through the year and felt like we were just trying to keep up communicating. So it's a communication tool for sure.
yeah, and then typically in EOS, they have you as a leadership team roll it out first. So you do it as a leadership team because you're never going to get it perfect the first time. So we were running it as a leadership team 6 to 9 months before we ever rolled it out to our team. We kind of perfected it, figured out the process, and then rolled it out. So it's done in phases, and they say that it could be anywhere. Typical timeframes like 2 to 3 years to roll out, but some organizations take longer.
Mhm.
It depends on the size of your organization and what you're doing, but that's kind of the typical rollout time is 2 to 3 years.
It's definitely,
Thank you.
all right. Any other questions on it? Here's some of the, why might you benefit from EOS? Here's some questions, thinking about getting some control over the business. A lot of times we're kind of hostage to it. How can we start being proactive instead of reactive? Getting better alignment across your organization. That was definitely one of my driving motivators was how do I better communicate? A common thing coming from employees was, well, we didn't hear about it. We didn't know about it. How do we get better at communicating? And really it's not because we don't want to communicate most of the time. It's because we don't have the mechanism to efficiently communicate until after the fact. It's just really hard to be a proactive communicator in a larger organization. And this helps facilitate that. Profits is a driving motivator. I mean, being able to set those scorecards and allow people to really think it was amazing to me to realize, well, it's hard to make a scorecard that you can look at weekly, But just sitting down with teams and having them go through the exercise of thinking about what would their scorecard look like, it was eye-opening to see, what people were thinking was the right measure for their success. And that was a huge benefit to the organization. A lot of people kind of hit that ceiling, and I know we were certainly struggling with how do we help empower and build leaders in the organization? How do we take what we had got us so far, but how do we train, cultivate, and build out new managers and new leaders? How do we help set people up for success? Having a framework's important at that piece. If your original leadership team has been together for a long time, there's so much institutional knowledge packed in that, so much culture and ability to execute success, but it's not necessarily scalable in the same way that you want if you're going into new markets or running into new verticals in your industry. So these are just some of the reasons. I don't know if
You covered it pretty good.
About 10 more minutes if you have questions.
I threw this in here at the end just to talk about, this is what the rollout process actually looks like. You start kind of if you're working with a facilitator, typically they're going to have some sort of introduction meeting. We interview multiple facilitators to get a good fit. You then have an entire day called the focus day. That's really where you're looking at figuring out what your accountability chart would look like. It's harder than you think. And org charts, they don't like org charts. Org charts have titles and names connected. And the accountability chart is really what is the function and the 5 most important things that they need to do in order to build that out. And then you have to think about today, but also in the future. So you might have gaps, but you have people, and it's not always the right person that fits in all of the seats either that they're in or that you can perceive into the future. So you work on that in your first day. You learn about how to set rocks. Then you spend 2 days working on the vision of the organization and build out that VTO. So this is your leadership team together going through that. And then you basically get in your annual cycle. So each quarter, your team comes together for an entire day to set the quarterly rocks. You look back on how you did, completing all of the rocks that you set prior quarter, and you set new rocks for the next quarter. And that repeats until your annual planning. You spend 2 days working on your goals for the next year, and then you go back into setting rocks. And they're basically, you have company rocks, and each department and each individual might have separate rocks. So the ones you're sharing to the organization are your company rocks that come from this planning session. That's in order to give your team guidance as to what they may or may not be working on that aligns up to the organizational goals. So different departments, different individuals can have rocks that don't necessarily perfectly ladder into company rocks, but ideally there's alignment there if you're building those out.
Yeah, and they say everybody in the organization should have 3 to 7 rocks. That's kind of the average. So everybody should be responsible for one piece of that. Any other questions?
I guess this is more of a per company question, but the capacity aspect of, do they want it?
Do they get it, want
Do
it?
they get it, do they want it, do they have the capacity for it? At what point do you guys make the decision that I'm gonna train for this so that they have the capacity to fulfill that role, as opposed to finding someone else who has the capacity to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that if you don't feel like they have the capacity, then they're probably in too many boxes, usually you don't get to GWC until you've gone through the people analyzer. So if you've determined they're the right person and you've determined capacity, that they don't have the capacity, it's usually mental to physical capacity. So, or time. And so if it's time, it's usually that box. Maybe they're in too many roles. Maybe they're split apart. But that's where the performance improvement plan. So if they don't have the capacity for it, then yes, we have to figure that out and figure like, what can we do to get them to that capacity? Maybe it's eliminating a role. Maybe it's having somebody help in, but it is kind of a per person, not really per company, but more of a per person basis and looking at what role they're in.
So it's not like a skill level thing, it's more.
Sometimes it is.
Sometimes it is.
Sometimes it is,
Could
100%.
be bandwidth or skill
Yeah.
capacity, okay.
And then in that case, it's how long can you wait?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Most entrepreneurial companies don't have a year to train somebody, but if you do.
Yeah.
when we went through the process, candidly, we weren't sure we had right people, right seats in all of the seats. And certainly as we went through the core values and the GWC component, we had really tough conversations where you would be evaluating 360 on that subject. And as a visionary integrator combo, you've got to decide, you know, can you train on the capacity side? When's the right time to make adjustments? It could just be wrong seat. You know, as you think about like an executive leadership team, a director of marketing is very different than maybe what you want from your CMO.
Yeah, for sure. I would even say like the people component, really like the people analyzer, like that has been the most powerful tool for me because, you know, as an entrepreneur and used to working on my own and then having employees, that's one of the hardest things to do. And to make like tough decisions like that, it makes those decisions a lot easier because you're not making the decision. They're making the decision based on what they're doing and how they're performing and how they're acting when they come into your organization. They're not meeting those core values. That's a detriment to your culture. You know, you're facing a lot more problems if you keep that person. So the core values and writing them, that has been a game changer because it's so much easier to point to, well, you're not meeting this core value, you're not meeting this core value, and these are the reasons why. It makes that conversation a whole lot easier. Makes the decision a whole lot easier.
Brett, does EOS integrate with Zapier or other software so you can pull data and tracking from your software on the tests?
If we're talking about beta 1, I don't know if there's a Zapier integration for that, but yeah, Zapier can integrate with just about anything. I mean, we use Monday for our scorecard and we pull data from different points for that. So it can be done, maybe not with the EOS.
I don't believe there's an integration in the beta. I think it's something that aspire to. There's a couple different software platforms out there that are paid services that do have all of the integrations. A couple of them are designed specifically around the EOS and operate like a Monday or some sort of CRM for EOS implementation, and they do have integrations. So we do use a combination of Power BI and data sets that are being updated. So when somebody needs to go update their scorecard, it needs to be something that is readily available, but it's probably available in one of our systems.
Quick comment on the right person in the right seat. That leadership team needs to decide, are they the right people in the right seat? So that's the first step is the CEO really supposed to be, is the CEO supposed to be?
Part of that day, you kind of go
So that
through
first day is really reflecting on the leadership team and
That is one of the hardest parts of rolling it out.
It is,
You really are.
I think that'd be a big seat, and that takes, you know, that's impressive. That's a meeting you don't necessarily want to sit in, but
It's
do that.
it's a necessary evil to figure that out.
Right.
It's a very, very important piece.
Somebody on your leadership team needs to go.
Yeah. And usually when you roll EOS, you're gonna identify a handful of people that are either not in the right seat or just not the right person for organization. You have to be okay with that. There is gonna be some attrition when you implement EOS.
And it may be yourself.
Yeah, it's very possible. It has happened.
Totally.
Yeah.
Day one focus day for each of you. Fast forward to where you are today, how much changeover have you had from who you thought was leadership team day one to now? You have all the same people?
We have about 50%.
Yeah, and
We have the same leadership team.
One last question? All right, let's thank our experts today. Can they best contact you two if they wanted to follow up? Brad, what would you?
I'd say just, you reach out to me by email, brad@spotedfoxdigital.com. Follow us, Instagram, LinkedIn, all of that. Easy to get a hold of Spotted Fox. Just find me. Easy.
Okay.
Yep, Brad@gravislaw.com. I'm on LinkedIn.
Okay, awesome. Awesome. Okay, and someone asked if they can get the slides, and
Yes.
Austin said we can send those out. Brad, thanks for making those. Feel pretty today. We also again want to thank STCU and Sarah Hitchelin. Did I get it? Okay, I got it. For sponsoring Ask the Experts and making it free for us all to participate today. Would you please do us a favor and fill out the survey document that you got when you came in, if you're here in the room, if you're on Zoom, if you would scan the QR code. Yes, you could also scan the QR code if you would like to do that here in the room as well. We want to make these extremely valuable and we want you to come back again. So, and tell your business colleagues about Ask the Experts. So again, they can join via Zoom or in person. I've also left a tool for you in the back on setting a vision, crafting that, casting it, and carrying the vision as just a value added for you today. So our next Ask the Experts, you had a flyer when you came in today. We mentioned KPIs today a couple of times and scorecards. We're going to go deeper into that. And Eric Boltz and Tom Walther will be here, and they're going to talk about KPIs, expectations for team accountability. So that is our topic on March 28th, again, from 3 o'clock to 4:30, and we hope that you will join us again. So may your business prosper in 2023. Thank you for coming today. We'll see you next month.
Yeah.
Thank you.